Sure.
What do you see that podium? No?
I want everyone to turn it out. I don't know. That's design work.
Do you need an extension cord?
I think there's one there.
Okay.
Hey, you can make this start.
I'm working on it. There's some chestnuts causing troubles.
Are we good? No. So you are the one who's fast at getting everybody to start.
I think,
Everyone with me?
as opposed to the chair.
Sweet.
You're having a debate. Be smart.
No, you're good now. Okay, sorry. Hey, you should quiet. Door.
That one too.
Contention one regional shift, U.S. trade leaders to the successful to hard, there was not all traders, the alternatives, preferential trade agreements, there was no trade loss and conflict that is to every little confidence, keeps solving little promise, but cocky, certainly the economic trade involvement for the fiction, there's an alternative, the WTO is naive and dangerous, expand rules, broader membership of the binding dispute mechanism means the new WTO is pivotal to international economic license demands and Doha, but further WTO is a focal point for global trade negotiations, critical to be great thing against Doha's double steps, big over about the future of multilateral trade, the U.S. is increasingly dependent on international trade, the rules based over the underpaid trade spending, international trade, the WTO is increasingly prosperity strengthening, the world trading system is essential to fighting terrorism, reducing poverty, improving health, improving China, other countries, all are linked to world trade, making solutions are inconceivable without a global trade system as the linchpin of today's order, underpinning security systems of an example of how multilateralism can work, the means of travel, international travel, and the driving force behind 8 rounds of trade negotiations use the instrumentality to help against these, the system moves forward from a ferocity with the direct use of is essential, therefore that the system of blocks with so much people and force stability and conflict, and now seeing the collapse of Doha dooms multilateral trade exchange, supercharging regional shifting, collapse of the December exchange trade to economic start, and failure of Doha will leave a gaping back into the global trading system. There will be a surge of bilateral agreements, will be a wave of trade litigation, which constrains the WTO's and the point the WTO was already extremely vulnerable prior to the collapse of Doha. Global economic slowdown has intensified opposition to the rest of Doha, threatens to discredit the entire WTO system, and this shift destroys global trade. First is the spaghetti bowl preference to trade destroys multilateral regimes, creating a patchwork system that politicizes the trading cycles development for Ravi and Bhagwani. 3. These scholars of international economics are fiercely hostile to agreements. They are right politicians, lovingly Russian mental agreements versus a deadly threat to the multilateral trading system. The result is a spaghetti bowl of rules, definitions, and tariffs using more agreements to weaken the power of corporations, trade negotiations, by no real fragment. The coalition of developing countries, trade limitations becoming a champion, predicting the capture, reshaping a source of the WTO, the image of American lobbying, which are damaging the global trade. They are undermining equal treatment that WTO by the use of a vehicle for trade issues for the benefit of narrow U.S. domestic interests. And 2 is trade loss, terms of regionalism, cause blocks in the trade wars, resulting in World War III. Show 6. Regionalism is replacing multilateral trade, constraining market with block stressful trade by raising new barriers to export trade. This associated with the rest of the world. Our case, protecting the rules for they institutionalized protections, a search for our case precipitates regulatory fundamentals for relations to simply odds with globalized reduction of fast participants, increases transaction costs, and resources reminiscent of the 1930s when blocks were mobilized for counter competition, contributed to World War II. The U.S. is reenacting working for rivalries that the specter of a return to destructive resources of the 30s remains. And the first 2 impacts of trade wars, the economies continue protections to receive to solve global economic collapse and global war, escalation of economic flashpoints, natural sea fires, and development. 15. Obama has committed to work with trade partners for avoid escalating protections and security price trading. When Bush don't move soldiers do, so 1930 recession had catastrophic global consequences. The result was a vicious self-defeating cycle of 10 times retaliation global economic activity, but global consequences for worse economic conditions, lower unemployment, increased poverty, accentuating social upheaval, living in destitute populations, easy prey to dictators, Nazis and fascists to the military, was impossible to divorce from economic turmoil, which allowed the democratic leaders to mobilize the national trade business, making up for poisoning to the economic which exacerbated our rivals, competition, use force, but couldn't got to trade and those risks with U.S. relations with China worldwide. Common ground with the Beijing risk retaliatory connections so they can severely damage both economies and escalate the confrontation over trade wars. The last thing the U.S. needs, given that China holds their debt when currently goes Saudi Arabia, North Korea, China prices will fuel, nationals and resources, surplus, Russia, increasing money after it's already activated global instability connections, policies can push developing economies over the edge of economic crisis, precipitate collapse, protection spiral, the U.S. will spearhead multilateral trade liberalization, and the third is China rises, inevitable declines, people rise over this war after very day. The Western world has just trying to power shift to a peaceful change that will only happen if the U.S. is about strengthening the existing order. The U.S. most powerful office to go to decide what sort of international order we place to receive them are open, and rules bring more likely rising power will secure interest through integration rather than war. That would include the building out of the material, including Doha, which is the critical states and character of the international order is a state estimate. Renewed U.S. leadership, the strategies to make sure order is not grounded in the bilateral ways, which comes to China to build its own pacts with cause the world to be broken into compete the U.S. and Chinese fears. And there will be a trade war, will win five. The U.S. legislation for China will benefit from trade officials, will ruin a mutual open and trade. We can trade war will increase into military power for Jerry encouraging anti-China sentiment in U.S. policy cycles since validate China U.S. advance over China, increasing pressure for our conflict. U.S. China war was nuclear testing and 16 straight times in 2000. Cross trade war, where all the countries are responsible for nuclear war, extending peace on a fire, the migration may not enhance opportunistic powers to overturn the existing world order. Russia will seek to define our landscape, the balance of power relations between China and hostilities between India and Pakistan are a new and dangerous trade. We see the destruction of civilization, the prospect of a nuclear armageddon over Taiwan, China will not entirely, but China puts off to run everything else. And attention to this multilateralism, they cause the collapse of Doha, the multilateralism, boosting, and everything the crucial instruments to building the global economy is the embodiment of the multilateral trade system. It's a great version of the 1930s, representing disputes to the tribunals, rather than these different type of retaliation. The WTO is a bulwark against trade laws and so parameters of the WTO. About to disintegrate its authority by the nations, file agreements and ignore rules, so a greatly increased the trade wars in the nation, a breakdown of the system of helping trade blocks and protectionism at bay, and multilateral cooperation solves global problems, not just have making up globalization, interdependence of markets are a ladder, out of poverty for the rough and order, or growing innovation is a more stable world. There is no going it alone in this century. Our ability to get things done multilaterally or find things which can shape globalization in a way that makes it equitable, sustainable, lines into the place for finding sectors between control, water variation, proliferation, and energy security. All of these issues have the roots in global issues and result less the case of politics and locally or allow politics to gestate, but using more than multilateral processes. And this leads to the end of nuclear war, prevents the effects of an escalating environmental destruction to wire for great power with nuclear weapons. We'll be looking at our future proliferation as a major challenge to stability, so we're thinking of crisis is environmental origin, and in the future, research and great power systems, China and Europe around the U.S. will be hard to keep things from swimming out of control. We can manage to be able to run out without global nuclear war potential exists for a major dynamic, and this is something we can provide in preserving and extending the multilateral system. The powers must be absorbed into the system and this cooperation with their apply to play the game of winners and losers. History repeats itself, and everybody loses. Our hopes for environmental crisis is going to concentrate the global action with great powers of law and competition. There's not enough tangible little trust we feels in these issues. The highest priority is to multilateral approach reliable and drift down to line systems and orders. There's no point drinking and leaking the network. We'll have to solve the problem of world economics of the existing system. That's why we have for government to win issues. Market payments, direct payments, export credit guarantee programs, kind of stable payments, working well for business, working law payments, production, flexibility, contract payments, and analogous substance for domestic government contractors, or to clarify. But next week is Doha revival. First is litmus test to vote on will cut subsidies won't be sufficient. Or NDT09, the bomb was supposed to get subsidies was a good step to arrive in Doha, but direct payments are not as traditional because other subsidies. Those are upgraded to traditional partners, call them help. The WTO cutting programs and support prices, cut rate P would do little for nothing. The tops that the kind of use damage for starting Doha requires more than just taking care of support and conflict or litmus test that leads to successful negotiations. Just now, toxin carbon are key towards a new global trade field. Toxin carbon, that idea of conflict, modalities in agriculture and industry, without modalities throughout the development of the world, leads to the inclusion of the round of sectoral negotiations solve Doha's most outstanding issues, so that domestic support, ICTSD, 1200. Recent consultations produce 4 movement on contentious issues. Several negotiators trust for resolving differences over sectoral should be critical. The better than the odds of striking either party submitted as established victories. The U.S. may be a little more easily compromised too, as negotiating credibility. U.S. side and substance has bolstered its key to agreement. Will find the willingness towards phasing out the trade sort of smart. It shows the discard the ability to demonstrate flexibility in negotiations. It is essential to work to agreement in agricultural matters. The U.S. not be able to contribute to a meaningful capacity as a major shaking power and ability to contribute is necessary for there to be successful conclusion as a result of federal system gets conflict. The U.S. persistent refusing to dismantle support that ongoing negotiations are likely to fail. New trade solves war. We're seeing one that the international lease of recognize for factors for the economy. Global trade system tends to slip backwards and parts of forwards. The attacks and somewhat more intensified regionals involves protections to the 3-block world while emerging reasons in the silence and would give way to positive liberalization, would give way to increasing antagonism, even hostility to regional blocks, and not check this emerging theory. Severe international conflict and disintegration of global economic links. And we saw the DSM solve Doha Shoemaker at 7. The DSP's report on topics of major milestones which Doha, but also referred to itself the dispute resolution process, becoming the aperture and trade negotiations, conflict and capability of the DSP interpreting, and of course the current becoming less important, creating a new program of negotiations, and WTO dispute mechanisms solving equities. I can sense some. The WTO disputes that is better than fair is good. It is crucial out of respect for the question of fairness. The system is reasonably fair. Cost considerations, considerations, but under what other international arrangements between a tiny country will accommodation and development and defending policies of the largest economy in the world. The system is the perfect is the enemy of the good, and not defining these global trade wars. We have 106. The trade consummation for trade war, the two by the global economy, which means central effect will control affecting industry after another trade consolidation is necessary to consider spillover looking at competition, not use agricultural trade for retaliation society. The issue will spill over causing health harms, spill over this back to research, trade war again. The unconditional signaling plan solves global protections, backlash, my idea, 3-6 registering law, stop the hard and more boxes, the single most valuable step forward, which can keep the current economic crisis from triggering destructive protections, backlash, and I can issues to agricultural subsidies, the idea of all agricultural liberalization of agriculture should not be conditional on the government to the WTO prevents flood protections of linking and 8 the threat faces the penetration slide to protections and organizations that get to translate into action with what reason why countries should not follow the rhetoric of the WTO to restrict and transfer away the use of trade measures. Global trade wars now causes conflict and global economic collapse in 1939. The protections was on the march and after the ASCII district turned around the African coordinated response to the deepest global economic damage since World War II. The surge of protections is casting a shadow over economic center of the world. Leaders sector member of the group 20 ended up in the measures and restricting trade to most with examples by America. The Obama persuaded countries to water down the Obama taking up warnings about dangers of protection to the countries of and other fronts of great economies with the next Mexico retaliated the Korean dispute. And its roots in NAFTA will cause broader frictions will be very easy to suspend under control. Those trade wars will be quite devastating. 2009 could be a very dangerous year that will collapse of multilateral cooperation in every area of the economy state. The multilateral matters more than everything able to get Doha is a symbolic importance to the talks of the recent to the impasse between us. The first international forum of emerging economies and an influential role by everyone's skill for the future of multilateral cooperation and these negotiating momentum will signify the trade deals. The WTO will be a weak will turn to litigation to reach their trade goals.
The plan eliminates user marketing payments, direct payments, etc. Does that mean that this money cannot be spent on agricultural support after the plan?
I'm not exactly sure what your question is. The plan.
Yeah, you know exactly what my question is. The plan eliminates a bunch of cotton subsidies. Does it also preclude it from being spent into agricultural support?
No, why not answer that question?
So is that a no or a yes? Or the plan does not take a stance on that?
The plan eliminates those subsidies.
Okay, so it certainly does not take a stance on that. Is there a piece of evidence in the 1AC that describes what subsidies need to be cut in order to comply with the WTO decision?
No, not in the 1AC. If you have questions, I mean,
No.
I'll give you like the decision if you want.
No, we're actually going to read the decision. Okay, China rise is inevitable. Competing U.S., there's going to be like competing U.S. and Chinese spheres. Where does this evidence say military conflict?
If we had integration, it is more likely they'll secure their interests with peaceful means rather than war. It goes on to say that world will be broken by competing U.S.
Obviously,
and
assuming
spheres.
it's obviously some trade conflicts, in my opinion. Does Doha solve
It does not say
the current financial crisis?
It's necessary to solve war. This
Answer
is
my
not
question.
assuming trade war. What's your question?
You weren't listening.
I was explaining the answer.
Does the plan Doha solve the current financial crisis?
Collapse of the economy.
So it does solve the current financial crisis.
When does Doha get, like, whatever it is, ratified, done with? When will people agree to Doha?
We don't cite a particular date. Our
I think
ICTSD
it's probably
evidence
important
indicates
considering there's a
that
huge recession
our
now.
ICTSD evidence indicates that the plan will lead to a swift resolution of Doha.
Why does it get India on board for SSM negotiations?
You make arguments about SSM, we'll answer it.
No, I want to know why it gets India on board for other things like
I
open
would say
causality.
that India doesn't care about SSM.
Okay,
ICTSD
why does
evidence
cotton
also says
overwhelm
that-
other things that we
Let me
violated?
answer that. ICTSD also says the SSM issue has been resolved.
Okay, why does cotton overwhelm other things that we violated in the past?
You don't read an app about other things. You read an app about cotton. Like,
There have been
other
other
other decisions that matter.
I'm just going to ask this question one more time, so when the 2AC references a bunch of app evidence, we won't be confused. There's not a single card in the 1AC that describes the process that the plan needs to go through to comply with the WTO. That's a correct statement?
I don't think so. No, that
is or is not a correct
our
statement?
Solvency evidence says that the elimination of cotton subsidies.
Okay, does it describe the cotton subsidies that need to be eliminated? The solvency evidence that you've read in the 1AC?
There's not a list, no.
There's not a list.
Like to read a process.
No, I would not like for you to read a card in cross-ex.
I would just read just subsidies, not plan.
Is the plan a phase-out?
Need to be eliminated. Plan doesn't take a stand.
Okay, does the plan begin, if it were to be a phase-out, does that happen now?
I'm sorry?
You heard the question.
No,
Does it happen
We
now?
get rid of subsidies.
What?
We get rid of subsidies.
So you eliminate subsidies. When does that happen?
Eliminate means get rid of.
Three off.
Hey, Ricker, do you need the whole 1AC? Or did he take the 1AC?
No.
Trade. Sorry, what? Trade.
Did he take them?
Hey,
Ricker.
I do not have, I don't have your 1AC.
That's on.
Yeah, we had a couple cards, but I still have those.
Green piece. Yep. Where goes my vice first?
Right.
Topionic cap, reduce means cuts, not shifts. Reduce pay clusters, smaller numbers, size, or bounds cap, removes their definitions, no date violation, plans and caps, overlaps, for reason, prefer, prevents, have back, recycling, inventions, firstly, small things, lay values, morning, good, credit, prevents, populistically, top class, inclusion, support, share, provide, still, member, to read, reduce, domestic, support, subsidy for cap, subject, reduction, the comma after board is beginning, but non-restricted clause means it's a act support topic, not domestic, subsidy, topic, reader, 94, these commas, to set up a non-restricted clause, in the sense, and non-restricted clause, telling you something about the subject, the sensibility, do not limit or restrict the meaning, while the non-restricted clause tells us something that's not for the possibility that they're different aspects of what each for jurisdictions, top cap should be based on competing interpretations, but the Senate budget committee's room farm subsidy given proposals to Captain Board of Obama's budget request algorithm in 26, the budget committee approved Congress budget resolution to debt cycle Obama's higher priorities of health authority to education deficit reduction, pressing health care budget movement, the conveyed bar grants, payments, subsidies, funding, already watching Congress criticize Obama's effort to limit farm payments. Obama's budget will pass Montgomery in 327. Democrats have advanced free leverage to Obama's budget. Democrats expect the movement to easily but over the next week. Even Senate Democrats who complain about deficits are likely not to block the request, and they will flash BC's means no budget from 326. The biggest obstacle of Obama's progressive budget most of the Democrats in states within a lot of farm plus Democrats to be pros. Now we're not going to represent the president. We're here to represent the states and senators who are largely lobbying to save back subsidies that Obama wanted to eliminate budgets, keep economic leadership, close global turns the case, business on 3-9. Observers of what the budget of the rest of the world is briefly definitively the U.S. operating resuscitating American economic system. The American budget restores the job market should be increasing willingness on the part of the lenders. Lenders are Obama making a quick journey towards the building economic forces. Obama taking legislative raise ability to provide U.S. economy is not spreading attention to bottom interest. But investments that are necessary to create a vibrant U.S. economy. United States federal government should eliminate its usual marketing payments, export credit guarantee programs, counter-cyclical payments, marketing loan, marketing loss payments, production flexibility, contract payments, and now subsidies for domestic coupling. The United States federal government should train the conservation compliance requirements by continuing direct payments for targeted for elimination of the affirmative plan only if the recipients follow better management practices, including enriched following crop rotations, use of biological crops, reducing tilling, buffer practices, cover crops, and illegally contribute 20% of direct payments to the millennium seed bank project extensions and waivers will be eliminated. Enforcement will include aerial satellite observation as well as the review of at least 1% of population submissions of various seeds, verifying seed bank contributions, base acreage, with growth at current levels, we would provide enough money to be able to solve that DWG. And 7.
Let's wait a couple seconds.
We're able to solve trade the branch and evidence indicate direct payments are not trade distorting. We have evidence to Library of Congress. And 5. The findings of U.S. direct payments do not qualify WTO exemptions to reduction commitments of fully decoupling and supporting means that no further consequences within the context of the case does not involve any compliance measures. Direct payments were deemed non-price contingent or evaluated in terms of the price clause and the millennium seed bank unique biodiversity hotspot. The funding is for the self-collect cats and aliens and world's biodiversity hotspot. Funding doesn't approve will have to self-collect means the only goal of the facility is to find unique birds focused on all species, not just crops and names. This order for the most species by 2020 doesn't take into the seasons that seeds are being used in Australia, Pakistan, and Egypt. Banks on the world seeds and not countries in the seed bank. These are about 50 million a year for the next decade. The value of Russian elephants and apple genetic material we already species have collected here in this while the habitat is destroyed and preserving genetic diversity stops their impact from causing extinction. Cargo contributed 3/3. Preserving genetic diversity scheme material are good as seed shocks like due to nuclear calamity or irreversible climate change. Total will hit us our food supply through more subtle threats of disease, climate change, pest system bugs, and continue to prevent extinction by preserving biodiversity, clock and 95 biodiversity and diversity, which depends on our consequences about losing. This critical resource can be devastating. The present work can be conditioned on restricting recipients and collaborating with law and implementation practices that embodies the richer effects of agricultural policy to ameliorated linking support. The investment in practice of Persian conservation needs to give historic lands that have agricultural production trade. Other development control conference has said the IQ 127 negotiations should have remained around until 2011. Don't want nothing's going to happen now that prices not down to increase the predicament for the farmers' cotton is insufficiency KW or why they safeguards for small farmers well because it's close subsidy for commercial language for making it determinable obstacle to WTO. They were granting districts a whole host of other issues such as cotton industry leadership fails from levying 312 before the economic times that WTO was ever aggressive of the U.S. push for liberalization led by example the U.S. continues. Bigger support for liberalization participates in tremendous challenge to the prospect of today. It's engaged very real for all of our evidence on these impact turns from heat and 3. The WTO acts in the invisible of the line efforts incorporates the WTO itself promotes the expansion of its own powers of regulation in the past few years and intellectual property rights which are governed in the most democratic way. Undemocratic ways with culture and we're already committed to our expertise marginalized support conclusion that we are doing a nasty reaction and recommendation of employment personal attacks on those who disagree with its attracted. Trend is a discursive base that is open to a broader democratic process where social movements represented the highly informed NGOs are actively general alternative concessions such as fair trade on which we're continually living with the environment to actively protect and contend with equal force and trade is inevitable, but their WTO is not able to solve trade wars brackets in 312. Although some governments will dabble in protectionism, economic solve vendors will limit the protectionist mandate and all members who have raised their trade will decline by 7.7% the value of global trade from which was 66% in 1930. Legal protection was actually on massive backsliding. It's not going to be smart that ignite global trade for governments and avoid measures change management or any economic conditions don't want us unable to solve global trade. The 8 sub point it doesn't prevent rollback between the 9 and how you will deliver the fight anyway. When new marketing company would provide the limited deterrence against future reversal trade policy that it does not. Blind development of policies effectively the 8 sub point new areas of trade from the 2 and 9 numbers for protection or coming concerns have been expressed by multilateral trade rules are needed when reference to genuine trade distortions. Versus multilateral rules, we come to disable the rating of such subsidies and your free trade arguments are people that I gross the free world theory. As far as statements around there is no compelling empirical evidence to point that the W is actually encouraged trade provision. The W is not associated with substantially enhanced trade. Member countries along the WTO do not have significantly different trade patterns and non-members of Doha collapse doesn't signal the end of trade allows for a reflection point that help develop countries from Raymond and A. I believe that Doha will provide countries with a much needed incentive and an opportunity for reflection and debate on how to restore the principles of trade and sense of recover the vision of those who shape the original construction of international institutions and end of Doha is not the end of trade product from five break up the trade talks. We'll get negotiated between the both of the issues of promote trade significance involving needs to pursue that growth and promote trade and industrial policies are repeatedly running about WTO whose gross over stars would not have been able to without the force actually did not have today's WTO restrictions applied to them delaying Doha's net for the economy levy 312 the price today. Looks quite different than it is 6 months ago, been different 6 months before our which should be included diagnosis and may not be possible to do that within the prices of further played itself out. There is historical and theoretical evidence that supplies there are alternatives to the WTO, James and A. Many of the classes multilateral talks completed bilateral regional use. This time, state confidence in globalization is already significantly gained to the greatly exaggerated government's experiment with the alternative policy which are delivering growth and prosperity global on the line. Since no development countries are unlikely to accept policies needed by governments of rich nations and multilateral trade is itself more important to 5. That trade for most pieces only partially free, but open trade is not beneficial countries that open and global trade of higher probability of more weakened because multilateral trade openness includes bilateral, because bilateral benefits of overreach to the large data set will take off and cause wrong evidence for the comparing of effects of multilateral trade openness increases the probability of war debt and W2 multilateral trade makes it more likely country goes war regional trade solves for markets have enough logic about the crazy to work at the regional level economics at the global level basically exclusively empirical of the work using a large data set of multi-economics taking into account many other possible determinants obviously intuition the trade different pieces only partially true it is wrong to take the next step include the globalization leads to more peaceful relations the countries are more open to trade with the rest of the world and more inclined to build trade conflict increase trade determinant and increase the probability of bilateral conflict the group of countries with which you agree which the risk of duties that can escalate militarily is the highest WTO is able to solve U.S. China trade needs first and it says the strategic each of the U.S. has not had all the potential confidential resort of the WTO can help solve individual goals but maybe key issues are higher that they do the best possible outcomes seems by using drawn out over extended periods of time and how these Chinese instability begin to enable what prompted China to reverse the support no how the aggressive creating farmers something China says about the government is worried about the social aggressive farmers while they think the economic position the farmer pulls all the risks total seems to be collapsed from 2028 Chinese that have to work with the hardship of the country Beijing getting with so much use the further farmers about some worries because the government face serious pressure from the farmers kills billions rinsing 5 it would not be correct the CCP resorts of violence with the food for to extend its license would not be able to would not hesitate to change the place to hold 1 million people hostage extinction 3 times the free imagine in China's Doha says success velocity of a development gallery report. The evaluation to wide benefits to parts of the economy to delay into its health and results to be reversible losing sector represents a long-term setback development rushing to do. WTO is sure media development countries individuals because of the developing world entire revenue comprises over 20% of many developing country government budget under house ready. Counter the president Doha agreement or status will priority the election fatality and engagement status of the world the election season of opposition or party committee waste opportunity politicians signal their different interests in the forest. Citizens announced that before violence sarcastic politicians take more pro-course has officers and leads to increase excellent influence from 9.8. Roland President said he had any farm subsidy political pressure the pressure is to keep the Indian government officials after confronting the world war the next that argument for farmers from recruiting guard subs to remaining official elected or the vast majority of Indians derive their income from farming if the government created something which will kill our agricultural sectors the political future will be finished leads to massive instability and escalates from Vadul and 5 days which would be disaster now so what he's been in a situation like Kashmir Northeast or would have right to rating the resources of the nation our force would have to be used and he would have to be provided busy finding for stability to include work of earth finds out that devices to reload from strategic environment which nuclear escalation this is your responsibility the environment is an equal factor in the launch of individual attacks against any while insulating itself against responsibility of wholesale any individual retaliation significant reading simply to the strategic field was actually promoted tactical stability on the subcontinent only cops and Doha able to stop runaway warming felony in the face of climate change questions about targeting over testers while the Titanic is one of the most important steps including the derailment of Doha's open trade is heavily dependent on Doha's wheels open because when it comes for 20 to 25% of carbon emissions the WTO has been control factor increasing carbon emissions for critics motos and shipping accounts for 80% of the world's international trade goods and significant decrease in global trade around it but we already have a viable strategy against climate change extinction of science states global warming continues to be and many of the matters including surrounding communities being taken into this scientific understanding of the world's around the wheel of war and unity communities seems to be looking at the desert the innocent little things being human kind of along with extinction among the more common in the world and Doha's able to solve international trade disputes but actually blocks will not compete with will compete with each other but not confront each other to oversee the escalation path for 1-2-26 will we see competition between blocks and cooperation breaks seems to rank and having countries go here rival and geopolitical blocks like previous revealed where the US and EU is kind of would predict competition but no competition among regional blocks.
Under what conditions can you
Status quo is always an option. Can I get those last two cards?
the net benefit only the internal net benefit, or are you also claiming politics as net benefit?
We don't claim politics. No, politics is not a net benefit.
Can you make arguments as to why politics is net benefit?
I mean, we can do whatever the hell we want to. It's constructive.
Okay. Let's start with the budget. Just have your business line of journalistic evidence that says economic leadership is talking about, I'm quoting, Obama presented his speech to Congress last week. This is the full card. The budget message of Obama is talking about how his speech has already solved that economic leadership. Now, this is
I'm not sure why a single speech would solve it. While it's true that he has to make sure the budget.
That was my question. I was sort of mistaken. My question is that speech included a large section talking about why subsidy cuts when necessary. It seems to me that your business line evidence indicates that or economic leadership.
Our business line evidence indicates that the crux of Obama's budget is focusing on economy, healthcare, and energy. The initiatives that are being passed through the House and Senate budget committees this week also include economy, energy, healthcare.
And there have been attempts to attach the draft and to cut subsidies.
That actually was all voted on yesterday. They decided to not do subsidies any longer. They compromised to make sure that it was crop insurance payment limits, which are entirely different than eliminating subsidies. You would take that compromise, which is why you collapsed the budget.
Political capital key.
That's what I was just talking about.
But
Obama has to be able to control.
Because of Obama's political capital.
Well, Conrad was trying to cause a massive amount of change. Probably if he actually eliminated subsidies, it would cause massive backlash by farm state lawmakers. Yeah, farm state lawmakers, states with a lot of farms. Moderate Democrats include a lot of Midwest Democrats
Let's
as well.
talk about the states with cotton. Who in cotton states are going to change their vote on the budget?
We don't have a piece of evidence on that in the 1AC, but we
Okay,
believe
well,
that
I'll
any
grant
kind of
you
subsidy,
permission
any
to
kind
talk
of
freely about this.
Okay, any kind of subsidies will lead probably to a bandwagoning effect. If you cut cotton subsidies after we haven't, when the WTO said that we had to,
Cotton state changes their votes.
it's not the argument.
So there will be people outside.
Cutting
of
subsidies causes backlash from farm state lawmakers because they rally around each other for fear that their subsidies will also be cut, especially since there have been WTO disagreements over other U.S. agricultural subsidies.
About the
Don't we have to do that for Doha anyway?
Why does probabilistic topicality hurt your ground? Doesn't that just mean, isn't that also a probabilistic solvency argument? And you just be able to make solvency arguments based off of that?
Yeah, we also can, and it is also bad for our link ground because we're uncertain whether any of the dissets we read apply to solvency terms.
More importantly, the counterplan that tests a reduction of agricultural support in the resolution seems like core negative ground. In your interpretation of what the topic
I don't
would be,
understand why you need to define core negative ground. Why can't you
because it's the
read arguments?
it is the resolution.
I haven't asked a question, Rick. Why can't you read arguments based on agricultural cycling bad?
Why should we have to
factor in the act?
says against an
You just said
untouchable
there's
plan
two types of
approval?
ground, and inevitably you get one of them.
Count. Judges always vote on those.
Couldn't even win on that argument in high school.
That's fine.
Hey, Ricker, I have a question. Does this counterplan the planning restrictions?
It does everything in your plan besides direct payments.
So the direct payments as they currently are continued?
It doesn't, well, not continue, but it doesn't lift the fruits and vegetables, no.
Okay, all right, that's what I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, you want to do that right here. Can everybody hear okay? We're having really big issues last time.
There's not a debate next door, so it should.
Yeah, we're having real issues last time.
Dude, where is the impact pickup? Yeah, actually, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, first.
Last year, when we did a lot of government, unfortunately, insurance
Okay, so what are the impacts on the actualized argument?
Yeah, we should have this as escalate.
There's some short-term values. Very. Yeah, I mean, going down for a little bit, especially gas prices. stack those in my email.
I'm good. Okay. The order is T.
Wait. T first, then K.
Yep.
All right.
The counter plan. Followed by policy.
You said T case counter plan budget?
Yeah. Okay, we're ready?
Legality won't meet the plan set to capital government concept by limiting the programs, preventing the reinstatement of those programs by limiting the analysis, substitute, counter interpretation, limit is to get rid of, limit to get rid of something. B, so we need interpretation, when it is better reason for predictability of the definition as no one said defined is defining the purpose of statement reduction. And export via the agreement on agriculture is not the broader definition of export. 3 is after on the interpretation, meaning the effluent is literally every piece of forcibly affirmative compete via the offset counterclaim, i.e. we cannot use agricultural supports, so obviously every single counterclaim would simply say eliminate the subsidies, but rewrite that money to something else and then read it identified, which means no affirmative wins in the NDT, which is really bad for is made its extra copy of the calculating is it affords the affirmative defendant bodies down to resolution 5, so there's no ground less because the affirmative is in the literature they get their content bad and every other argument is simply a question of solvency, i.e. will the subsidy have to depend on the no but we solve that by limiting now to something which means we solve for our ground concerns, reasonability, committing interpretation values, raise upon reasonability, good, we are good, and now this is the case to bring around all throughout the year, case made. Also, because I want to start the service, one is kind of these different manager, never specific some terms from 1C, A, so the sets to voluntary program, to get back the actors to the table, electric dust down, B, sexual allegation, the plan providing momentum for a change, in negotiating structure with shift from sector by sector, no negotiation, that's right, so this holds even if the other classes are aligning the seven functions of the conclusion, no commonality, they seem to look up to members face to face, the economic crisis will confirm their direct by neighbor, solution to it, negotiating flexibility, concept would solidify that, resolve the bargaining chip, resolve the other issues that they have in their architecture, no evidence, and this would also prevent the impact of the dog off, prevent destruction for the reason that works in the evidence, and we solve the dispute that will lead to the dispute which means all this future go, and none of the alternative causalities provided are more recent evidence, so in non-technical negotiation, as the considers your government and observes and long-term negotiation, distracting, I'm going to do on our SCP's evidence that the SSM's resolve they say trade, leadership is not solved, that's all our works, the evidence is contained, comment, they say that for further evidence, there's no reason our evidence more recent, assumes the economic crisis doesn't, they don't assume the spillover effect of they say trade is inevitable, this is wrong, one is economic crisis that is fostering regression and desperation, 40-47 major crimes have increased their protection, Mexico, the environment, are all groups that fosters isolation, causing conflict, because when we goods are necessary to prevent armies from causing murder, that's Patrick evidence from 3, 13 is in CFR, City Road 2 is the white block flag, and W cooperation each shift to regional blocks, which would prevent aspects of worsening background into evidence, 3 is economy, even if there's no trade versus causes, economic opposites for Patrick government, we also act as China, most violence and factor, next intended to would be able to contain backlash or done to us that would prevent the raising of these tariffs and the plan. So all arguments for market saving the Obama road trade policy in chapter 0, they intend to restore council laws to working to wait for the defense and indication of administrative intention to get the order to unwind this trade. They say the legacy of dozens of over short-term impacts. Additionally, when that low waves would mean there's no confidence in the future, so it doesn't solve these RTAs. Solve this now removes piece 187 contradicts the leads to a spaghetti goal. It leads to race the bottom where FTs leads to self-interest deals with arbitrary rules, which means it's not good for trade. It also excludes country, which means it's also where things like multilateral into these trade box because it politicizes trade, which is why we need a multilateral framework. It allows people to cooperate and just in fragments, cause global trade. Additionally, none of these are the short-term trade wars are going to be that is why the fragmentation cuts over next days. Multilateral trade does not solve the impacts on the trade regime, so quick we can multilateral trade, but the economy access of a regime that allows for cheap place cooperation and allows you to interest solves, which means none of the government supplies it. Say doesn't tell China what is economic crisis please come, which means so we saw in I agree every sort of any rate provide strategic incentive where the woman says there's the only sphere for escalation. They say China knows when they don't agree evidence that we would affect contradiction to us is bigger than 9 because their economy is already screwed and trade is the only snare for a cloud from 809 that China will suffer the most money China produce and for Thursday. Nervous Chinese economy will be overwhelmed. That's not good now that the global trade war will still let out their additional will be able to contain all of their other there's no reason why they don't estimate. They say we hurt developing countries. This is wrong because our Barbadian says that virtually leads to ideological issues towards their leads to poverty and our payments with the system we provide recourse to solve for all these things that are in the arguments wrong because there's no reason why India would reciprocate before their election. They have no causal evidence that would lead to the nationally sufficient leads appear clean night because there's never going to be war, two, and Canadian hostility. Is that more potential or likely to go into war that was insured financially depths and those who can afford it? But I don't have any fear that over there more than 10 2 months when moving soldiers they definitely be out there and muster some satisfactory response. Basically to this gun solve we're most piece money see evidence proves that trade is all inevitable, which is the more your evidence, which means if we prove the RTs are bad, then that means you don't access evidence or dwyer evidence is only a multilateral cooperation is proved to solve because you need cooperation to lead to things like Copenhagen. Their next argument is Blackstone, fight that was answered all above and early action go is necessary to rely on this leadership. Overseeing trade when you trust the board is for responding by another biological note, the board will be looking for early action was trade, most trade essential for countries, traditionally with leadership on trade will be necessary to our global understanding nuclear war costs about 95 West leadership would include the rise of other hostile global war and all the impending fusions including nuclear exchange and counterpoint. When this government does not solve the case, we just some technical compliance is insufficient. We just need to eliminate the problem to solve quick resolution. Additionally, doesn't solve the unconditional symbol of blame because it's multiple conditions, statements, and 6 phases with their fewer reviews, tracking the letter, and changes, in which other concepts will be eliminated or influence for progressive self-protection policy, make factors for later a change in policy and compliance credibility, forming subsidies to simply proceed to sham and circumvention, which means even if the substance of the counterclaim wrong, it doesn't. That's why when you were negotiation arguments in Pearson, if I think certain workers express cost attribute responsibility of performing subsidy or to take position that any type of subsidies ever injury technologies can affect the production price of trade distorting the trade rates globally, and the large countries are evidence that the governments will be sham and brown programs company rid of their commitment to this suspicion targeting brown programs. The U.S. by either merge permutation to both permutation to the counterclaim. You also don't want any short-term arguments because they are not a single that we support trade or material. This says when you support trade, you're sure counterclaim is single that you support conservation measures, and counterclaim does not reduce our net level of subsidies, which means you don't solve problems and not the loans are something about to be eliminating subsidies necessitating overall reduction. If our programs, the growth should be being the total payments, and they don't solve because they don't lift the fruit and vegetable restriction movement. You do not comply with it all. The DSP decision 1997 that removed plant restrictions that are tied to money payments, place direct payments rarely in the green box. The eliminating partnership expenses in compliance. Most farmers want to produce special crops, normal beers, nothing to do with planting. Restrictions means they don't solve in these stats also solve conservation shift. Arguments like ski and non sectorial producers, they should see the couple of climate change and conservation trade with territory some supply environmental conservation new adds in the environment to stay indestructible and resilient. Each part 95 the environment is indestructible. These surrounded as we report discussing radiation list afterwards holding the new arsenals for the environment control would have expanded making it to expand the force of the country resisting condition multilaterals and be able to solve all your impacts because even if it is true that the counterclaim doesn't necessitate the counterclaim, it would eventually lead to those things that the collaborative cooperation on things like seed banks and there's no impact to your arguments because there are other seed banks savory and for the virtual global cooperation that's being created since 14 banks the trust will be created within the UI across the biotechnology and GM solves for arguments for being one and private trade with 16 animals and purpose cloning allowing for any reintroduction of species and finishing with that strategies. Demonstrating CC strategy having multiple position applications moving targets to CC strategy plus offense means we cannot choose to our strategy and B promote target responsibility. One is not double turn themselves when which means we cannot generate offense. This will surround super applications skills and here cost analysis possibly making this also all of their offense at worst. It should be a to our choice that we should be able to stick with these task or the counter context. One type of project plan on models include the Lord of Flies, turned everyone else's fashion is gender driven and to 327 local construction fashion models, economic plan, larger gender far from the on-party political resistance, challenging healthcare equal to slash the budget use, challenging the incentive and questioning subsidies and freaking also reducing collectively population, government policies, and government corporation states to close the no evidence when the actual vote is coming out of the budget, which means there's no cost spillover, there's no reason why any politician would actually switch more. So the Obama would not get blamed for the plan borrowed in 90 hours were practically a distance out, so for the decision to come that he is the last person to learn about these Russian escalations, absolving his claim. He went on to blame others, politicians, for the merits of the bill, and subsidy cuts are critical to his political muscle, which means he can get the budget done, dropping euro and 95 of the Department exercise political muscle, will catch the attention members of Congress who are applying to towards this institutional and economic cuts, plus the will genuinely have solid recommendations and sense that the members of Congress need to get their laws rolling in a different direction and end their focus on subsidy fights. Right now, we're just some of the Mexican Farm Subsidy just beginning despite committee vote. Both sides have deficit are pressing for cuts, and there are many countries go there are many discussions about the economic process is just starting to come to subsidies is huge when for Obama politicians, but and you can possibly resolve one piece you can vote for the plan and the budget and resolve the budget political 327 budget debates early outbreaks for the Congress. There's not insignificant for the White House to try to keep the agenda alive. Truly winning requires some mandate. That's the problem facing Obama is doing everything he looks like a winner. He lacks the only right to join that. It's most trouble for his agenda down the road. He is an early test of political sentiment. Should subsidy programs be open for debate and stem cell like causes massive things within the budget now that was supporting 330 Friday subsidies be changing the how budgetation that would ban the use of funds for the issue which is wrong the numbers of the senators brought the budget coming from the administrative petition. They have no propensity for their impact because their evidence is about the proposal. The proposal included the plan, which means the plan is for the impact. They do not turn the base beats and control, turn the uniqueness for a piece of 1AC. Economic evidence is multiplied cooperation is dead. They know which means the budget does not support whereas the plan does all the impacting political capital is regenerative, similar in 90 despite the certain kind of evil proposition, no considerability rating, but it's making countries political capital spent against the scans. In 6 weeks, but political capital is regenerative when the president states the great deal. Here's what he can build out more capital. Here's what is happening, and all the impacts are inevitable because we access short-term economic crisis. Yeah.
Just one quick question. Do you have a counter definition of the common resolution?
No.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no spillover between issues, how will he be able to use ag subsidies as part of his budget plan?
If
How's he able to
why are you
push it?
starting that there's no spillover between issues?
I'm just sort of confused. Like, does the political capital thing overwhelm the spillover thing? Like you say, there's no connections between issues or whatever. So
I said that politicians vote on the merits of the bill. Yes. Yes. If there is no spillover, then there is no propensity for a disad or a link or a link term. If there are spillover,
subsidies are like in the budget, right? Like you try to include in the budget. Why wouldn't there be a connection between those two? Sorry, did you just say no spillover? You don't read evidence. You
do
don't
you
say
want me
anything like
to talk about our link terms or about
no, this spillover argument. I'm just sort of confused about it was connected with the budget.
Okay.
How is
The
there
core
no
issues in the
spillover?
budget are healthcare, energy, and the economy. I feel like there are constituencies that support each of those that would probably try to get those passed or the lobbies.
Yeah, I want to move on to this trade
None of
stuff.
those.
I want to ask you again, how quickly do you get Doha?
Regardless, the signal of the plan is part of our social
I said it, you need to solve short-term
We read
war.
a piece of Madera evidence that says if the U.S. unconditionally liberalizes agriculture, that it would show its support for Doha. That is able to contain some of the short-term impacts of our Doha arguments.
Which short-term impacts?
Our patchwork evidence that says.
Yeah, what's that mean?
I was obviously going to explain it after that. Which says that because of the protectionism brewing the status quo, it is spilling over to lead to isolationist policies that makes trade wars likely. And even if those trade wars don't escalate, it is strangling economic growth, preventing recovery that leads to desperation, despotic leaders, so on and so on.
When will this spillover happen? When will there be a war between the United States and China?
Our patchwork evidence from literally 2 weeks ago says this shit
that's
is happening now.
When is there going to be a war between
It
the United
says it is
States?
starting to happen. We just had a dispute with Mexico. We had Buy America.
Mexico equal China? Is that your argument?
If you don't think these things are interrelated, then we don't mind creating a trade war with our third largest trading partner. If that doesn't signal the direction that we're going, then I think that you're being a little simple-minded.
A little simple-minded. Is Khalilzad talking about liberal international relations theory like your affirmative, or is he talking about really hardcore realist U.S. putting its troops in other places?
He's talking about containing great power conflicts.
Via what kind of hegemony?
Well, we don't read any of those arguments. That's why we read internal link that's based off of reviving Doha, giving credibility to U.S. commitments. And
You think everyone here, like, you really don't think he's talking about hard power in the Khalilzad?
I'm saying that we aren't reading any of those.
We retreat from the war.
We read a term.
Yeah, I know. I'm asking about your
You would like.
I'm asking How will liberal trade help us keep our military in the world?
Which
It prevents there is no reason for countries to fight us.
Which card did you read on these 2 pages?
I don't even know what you're doing. I read orange on both of those.
This card?
Yes, that's other, yeah, like the tags are those tags.
Yeah.
We got no. No.
Okay, so your interpretation is now that the plan's money cannot be recycled, definitively not recycled? You're
No,
reading
we
on-
get rid of the subsidies. It cannot be recycled into analogous cotton programs. Payments can no longer be called, alpha payments, and the same shit can be recreated.
Okay.
Do you have any of the tendency to trade stuff?
We have, yeah, some of it, I mean, all of it, but it looks like it.
What do you have?
White face, all white people, that's just not consent for all white people. Something takes the same.
Like literally.
Right here, Towson put all white face, it should go all white people.
I take it at face value. Last night, what is that the last one?
I would vote against that if the other team stood up and said, no, we shouldn't.
That's all it takes.
I wish people would vote for it. I really think.
Do these outlets are not wearing most like,
I don't know if it's
okay. These outlets?
Yeah. Can you give us 1 second to set up our printer and those out and stuff?
I just plugged it in Twitter. Is there a prayer break? Yeah. Oh. There we go. Okay.
We don't have internet. We have internet. We can do that one. Where's the chair?
No, man. Bring too much into it. Yeah, but it's a guy in a suit.
You need it up. You just pass it along to someone else. Like someone.
You're at the top.
6%.
Okay.
Good shit started.
Alright. Alright, and you have to run.
I think you're gonna get my burger.
Alright, I start in 10 seconds. You gotta get it.
To what? T and then the, T and then the count number?
Overview waiver?
What?
Overview waiver?
Just like, actually, yes, on both.
What?
Overview on both.
What are the goals?
T and the counterplan.
It's fine.
I didn't remind me. Okay. Pretty tough.
Top guy can make some key interpretations, reasonabilities, arbitrary, these can always be reasonable, doesn't take into account things like cross-examination decisions, pre-round decisions, and research decisions, because if we believe that the affirmative is not top, we won't focus our research on other ones. The affirmative, they could run a CTBT affirmative and give us all about links to ideas that still didn't inherently earn today. They have not counted to find the comma anyway, which means that they have not presented a reasonable interpretation of the topic, which means they can't, or of the comma, which means that they can't meet the burden for reasonability. They say that we meet the planet's cap, they make the we meet argument the planet is only a cap if it is true inside of the cotton subsidies, not in the context of agricultural support. The commas mean that it's the agricultural support topic. Think of the sentence, men who love football should go home. And if it's true, that statement means that men who love football should go home, but they put commas in between after men and after home, and then it's men who do love football should go home. That means that all men who love football should go home. The basic argument is it's the agricultural support at the beginning of the commas are more important. I'll probably have to explain that a little bit more eloquently. In the two they say that we solve all of our offense. The offset counterplan is inherent negative, it's core negative ground because they get to leverage all of their affirmative offense. They get to leverage affirmative offense based on agricultural support against it. Plus, the plan would lead to a shift because they don't solve any other arguments on the all there's some steps to the counterplan, also some steps to the giver, and most married fall pledge to not be forced to reduce overall domestic support because they have monetary resource shift to support more evidence for clear and free market access to reduce subsidies. But in all likelihood, companies to shift support if it's true that their person evidence indicates that the green subsidies are viewed very negatively internationally. The plan could just be recycled into other green subsidies, which would still support cotton farmers, which means they cannot solve. Or they say it's not extra, no use to bid export. They say there's no grand loss that allows for the affirmative to choose recycling event to get rid of core negative ground because they solve links to politics stats makes that affirmative probabilistic top. They said the question solves you have to get no. There is no evidence in the one AC that indicates there. Or they say the reasonability is good enough to answer this argument above. This is an important debate, even though it doesn't seem like a PSE. And no political based on the NICO support. That's also the confrontation about the practical support on differentiation policy concerns distinction between support direct payments counterplan. Counterplan solves the entirety of the affirmative. They have not read a single piece of evidence that indicates the exclusion of direct payments means that it's not necessary enough to lead to compliance with Doha or for multilateral trade. We'll concede two 1AC solvency arguments. First is the Boston evidence that indicates the reason why current subsidy cuts are not enough is because he's only offering them to make them in direct payments, and those are the non-trade distorting direct payments, which means that it really goes in place. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt trade as per 1AC evidence. The second one is the unilateral cut solve argument because it brings other countries on board. The counterplan is still a unilateral cut, and that evidence does not make a distinction between it being necessary to solve compliance overall. We solve the internal links to the act anyway, even if we solve the internal links to the act anyway. So point A is Germany, it's key to environmental leadership well, and some of the U.S. would have the ability to make key policies to only conspire trade partners make similar efforts. Governments also need to be able to target some environmental policy essentially to reward farmers with environmental solutions. It says no one will be achieved by identifying U.S. leadership that's key to hedge Walter to the country's hands to work with the international global trade to not only say take leadership of environmental degradation transparency U.S. may no longer be reviewed as a leader for the perimeter and policy making. Also, its model Parliament 96 U.S. tremendous success nationally has been able to serve for us from the domestic policy, humanitarian policy, and a lot of the home maybe desirable for leading should take preemptive the environmental protection, unilateral elections, limitation just for the moral situation, letting countries more credible, the unilateral domestic policy, with policy steps and valuable international consequences when they are not followed up by international agreements, self-warming international programs, into the 20% of projected carbon emissions reduction call for the Kyoto Protocol could be accomplished by U.S. by decrease in U.S. oil, such decrease would also offset the U.S. country contribution to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with enhanced agriculture production methods. So we can take that annual increase to zero just by dropping the plant residue carbon. And so they have conceded the 1C evidence indicates warming leads to extinction rates. We saw that for extinction impacts over all the wars because they have a piece of evidence indicates war. Whereas the environment obviously people would be able to survive those wars because of the sea banks and lifestyle are two net benefits here. First, the sea banks evidence indicates that the United States support for the sea banks is necessary to be a back check on all forms of extinction because things like climate change, asteroids, and wars are inevitable. And those things will collapse agricultural diversity, but only in a world where there's a sea bank will those things be survivable because we'll be able to backlog agriculture. Also indicates that does things like most things that are able to solve soil erosion, which would be able
able to protect the environment. It solves the case arguments of more than here. Our 1NC evidence indicates that while the WTO dispute did make a comment about direct payments, it did not make those with regards to compliance. It only said that you could not use those as green box subsidies. They qualified as amber box subsidies, but it did not say that they must be eliminated like all of the other subsidies. Here's more evidence of this question from the WTO upland decision in APF body health payments findings said that the effect selection program is an issue of marketing loan program have payments subject to agreements work loss anticipated to payments significant. First, the PO found that other U.S. support programs like production and country payments shirking and company insurance without cause serious prejudice to result in injuries because we self-85 failed to provide necessary counseling between these programs significant. Suppression in the WTO created a bright line about legality for compliance that excluded direct payments USDR and for the made critics fund the detailed payments for agriculture production and charge out price penal check facility for results arguments essentially signed with the lower body back to the timeless literature showing that these payments are more minimal effects to force institutions well concerns all U.S. support agreements to store production trade penal side with U.S. and direct support results on the claims of penal Brazil should fail to U.S. domestic support programs to increase the U.S. will to the panels plan U.S. domestic support programs to cause per se the cause of serious prejudice to Brazil and agents also the counterparts of WTO direct payments are relevant from February 09 International Center for Trade and Civil Development. Direct payments are not the most contingent subsidies these talks as long as they meet WTO requirements beyond nature with two type volume production they are teamed up field and greenhouse gas payments are except for production they have the most contingent types of subsidies fair with the world markets the price go up they go down but your direct payments would do little or nothing for the Doha ground talks as Dan Sunder at Farm and trade policy specialist UC Davis told Reuters and cuts and other subsidies are sufficient. Granted, February 09 analyst at Obama would do want to help the U.S. case WTO by cutting other types of farm programs that support price elsewhere or direct payments would do little or nothing to solve the talks or to solve the talks it's the same dude also full compliance only 33% from $80 for the 6 but some expect production against contract producer subsidies as for former fully WTO rules when scenario which to produce subsidies cut by 1.3 billion to 2 billion also the count by solves it's enough money we a chart and they didn't answer the compliance arguments also linked to status quo from Wilson in 2007 early 2008 we've seen continued compliance from the U.S. and Irish style recordings of Club and Japanese hot roll still case because failure of Congress passed native remedial legislation continued debate over compliance in ECG in most cases in the U.S. Birdman the case is also zeroing from slated from the U.S. also the case in zeroing but in the future we have the practice for how many Americans expect to trade parties like that to be sure if we refuse tax responsibility we lose the case it's only a matter of time for that but a new sheriff from U.S. exports forces that in observing casinos OC7 of the U.S. government the decision by the U.S. government to get a lot of modify is regional agreements to move on all game for the WTO authorities slide to global organization decision is voted out which called the Senate opening the doors box must surely be an understatement so would reside conceded argument they let's consider argument the original paper from the original 1NC indicates it's all for the trade compliance arguments they say that it doesn't seem the unconditional signals about international negotiations not domestic negotiations they say reform doesn't solve the plan because of the way that they answer the cross-examination questions of the 1AC is also this reform because it doesn't cap overall support the money could go back into agriculture which means it is that same type of reform it's only begs the question of where that money ends up going the permutation of cap is mutually exclusive for these two permutations shouldn't allow a bunch of new analysis because it's literally just saying those words is mutually exclusive because the capital leaves those subsidies in play or leaves the direct payments in place and conditions those and it just gets rid of the rest of the same permutation of the counterfund that's obviously or at least in that benefit this one's obviously sevens because the capital leaves those in place the counterfund doesn't support trade that's just an analytic they say the counterfund doesn't decrease the level of subsidies it does decrease by about 90% they say it doesn't look for fruits vegetables that's not the plan either we change the direct payments to make that change the direct payments in a way that makes them more environmentally friendly even if we don't live that the signal of the counterfund will be enough they say the status quo solves that's evidence about green payments out of the OVA card and well actually that's just about green payments class and for compliance mechanisms for our quite different class of environmental subsidy program compliance mechanisms not subject to program homeless and advice from and environmental subsidy subsidy for environmental improvement can encourage producers to continue to expand crop production and ensure environmental gains compliance mechanisms should not require subsidy payment and issue those already in place these programs provide the underlying incentives to produce supply and compliance mechanisms to the most suited to ensure and environmental damaging actions they say that the environment's resilient that's not true from community one and have to church must only facilitate significant institutions even the most resilient systems not tackle enormous and most can about that the attack approach provides some ecosystem buildings pride but across the board all three ecosystem apparently is significantly different for different those who be studied to progress wrong the result could be the result could be catastrophic to mortal and community one finally is the multitude of extraordinary fellow passengers the multitude is strong person export those control one explaining these species into extinction will be seen as obligation for flaring out the species for that because that other species has a right to exist to other sea banks species CSK from Cooper and ability of sea bank is the only project that's kind of the world which is quite dead several diversity there are 1,400 other sea banks which 4.6% of the world pie diversity of the project came to collect the rest more evidence and now there may be many sea banks globally have less ambitious objectives they're tiny the equipment skills for the result is poor practice their Avery evidence is the reason why monocultures aren't that bad is because we have sea banks which is an argument for GM solvents of their GM solves evidence is hype there will be a government other sea banks also from the science was made that kind of sea bank is the Norwegian sea bank is only 200,000 for rights to agriculture for most of these samples for it's in a tiny fraction.
meeting prep? We're good. Okay. Alright, you make a big deal about reading evidence from February 9 about why direct payments are relevant to trade negotiations. These cards about how direct payments are relevant to trade negotiations, these cards are a reference to Obama's plan to cut direct payments in aggregate to farmers who make more than $500,000, not in the context of cotton nor the DSP decision. Why is this at all related to the case?
You read a card in your 1AC that says that the reason why cutting direct payments isn't enough is because those are the ones that are non-trade distorting, so nobody else in the world really cares about those things.
That's your different in the case of cotton. There was a dispute where they said we need to, at minimum, reform our subsidies. You don't even reform the direct payments.
We read a piece of evidence from the decision that says that the conclusion was that they cannot be decided as green box subsidies because there are fruit and vegetables limitations, which means they have to be included in the aggregate amount of our amber box subsidies. That doesn't mean they have to be eliminated like all the rest of them do.
Yes, which we are already above, which means you sustain that level of support via direct payments, and we're still above the cap of aggregate support.
But the rest of the counterplay would put us below in regards to amber box programs.
No, because the direct payments are large enough to put us above the AOA cap. Do you have any evidence about that?
Well, I don't think I heard about the 2AC argument.
It was.
A card that says failure to cut. You haven't read a single card that says the word direct payments in it.
That's just factually incorrect, right?
They did. All right, so it's not trade distortion.
Yeah, that one. That's true.
Person, statements, actually every card says the word direct payments.
Yeah, right. Person's not just about cotton. Person is about payments overall.
And here's where I want to get. Person is about green payments in the context of trade negotiations. You read a lot of evidence about the DSP case. You know, the WTA decision created a bright line for legality. Yes, with regards to compliance, part of our case is about compliance. The other part is about making the necessary cuts to lead to the resolution of Doha. And what evidence do you have with the word Doha and green payments?
Oh, just those good cards from your 1AC that said if we do an unconditional approach, that'll get other countries on board.
No, that evidence is about short-term protection, not about China advantage, not about our multilateralism advantage.
I really think that 7 judges are going to be like, well, this is true that your act might solve a little bit better, but the counterplan certainly solves because you don't have evidence delineating between direct payments, which is like 20% of all of the subsidies, and the other ones, especially when the WTO did not decide that direct payments were in violation of compliance.
We have signal arguments for short-term protection.
Why does the counterplan not solve the signal? It gets rid of the most trade distorting
I'm saying
subsidies.
even if you do, that doesn't solve our other two advantages, which are about Doha.
What is
right?
Yeah, it does. The only solvency deficit possible is one based on
What happened
compliance.
about that? All right, topicality. Offset counterplans means we say you must reduce agricultural support and you must eliminate cotton subsidies. Counterplan. Eliminate cotton subsidies where all of our advantages come from and say, instead of reducing ag support, put it to ag carbon sequestration. How does the affirmative answer that?
You should have your craft a 1AC that says agricultural support should be decreased like the resolution asks you.
You have to defend the entirety of ag support.
A reduction in it, a substantial reduction, not the entire thing.
Bottom of the bottom of the counterplan. Budget disadvantage. Trade limits. Oh, that's it. Bottom of the counterplan. Budget and trade.
Can you just give me for a second?
Yeah.
So that count as part of the
Counterplan.
You're harsh.
Right. I'm good.
You take prep from me.
Alright, he's done.
Just move it down the line.
It's good.
It's not that bad yet.
Like pretend to be bad one time and then just bring in
Team
commercial gym property increasing drive by the drought tolerance enhancement return of voters records under disease specific representatives and like dollar crops of land. You substantially increase the percentage of farmers upon the resistance we use by upping the dose and conditionalities could our interpretation point conditional counterpoints like an we read a single conditional counterpoints spend a lot of time on the block we get our jobs just with the affirmative spending which should be allowed to do anyway we can't keep it as in the app only having an option for our ability to make sure the apartments a good idea to whip dark we just say the after about ideas as well logical state the capital you better back we have to first speech seven different times conditionalities not able to solve with yourself do they can solve solve the argument it's there to read article place of the plan it's just basically reject the capital not the budget we're not going to the argument there's no spill across examination there's no stage which we both the issue also continue the budget's not going to pass it takes the United States ability to have any economic leadership takes out the legitimate impact on the third grade page we'll agree they were able to solve the WTO quickly look the cross examination was pretty clear we're able to solve swiftly and this acts to solve our impacts and how they're able to solve WTO just as they're able to increase trade leadership does it also mean they're able to solve WTO in the short term conceded for our evidence the evidence says that they're just a nasty reactionary organization which is employing personal tactics driven by multinational corporations to be able to uphold their own agendas in the back doors of the WTO. They have no evidence, no evidence for people that are not based within the WTO about why it is good. The board of a subpoint will not able to solve for our evidence. It's the most comprehensive. The modern evidence indicates that regional trade agreements are able to solve better when it's multilateral trade. Countries are really far apart, so it's really like they're able to go to war. It's easier for them to generate the supporting increase the likelihood of conflict. This evidence is really the best thing you're going to read in the debate. The subpoint is that a complete versus confrontation argument. The body just because there are blocks system to go where there's going to be the European Union, China, as well as several other countries in the United States that are going to go to war. There may be conflicts, but it's not going to lead to global trade war. This is substantiated by the actions of the 312 evidence. Pretty close to this piece of evidence. The debate indicates it's not going to go to a global trade war. Like in the 1930s, it was about 66%. The decline in trade of about 66%. We're about 7.7% right now. Trade wars won't happen. 36, I believe, will end up with the trade war comes to protection source within the WTO. First, there really been a protection inspection to open up 40 cents criticism. Second, rate retaliation force party to play. The most possible making preparations. Customer protectionism will not have a big impact beyond trade feasible yet. But there will be a little possibility of trade conflict. Regionalization is able to solve markets up. Increased trade flows created by regional trade agreements are pacified visible trade conflicts are local because they find their margins support our because this is not a small achievement as a globalization that receives away the economic times of ours to make countries those with the highest risk of reducing and escalated military conflict may become more prevalent, except our multilateralism does not need to be able to solve. Multilateralism is not able to solve the sea because there will not be any money in the short term, and they have no evidence on this question. Also, multilateralism is not able to solve trade. Regional trade agreements are better than gains. So, please don't. Let's not keep trade. We read a piece of two. Two pieces of evidence indicates they're not able to solve. Prevent rollback as the WTO allows for the things that are clean to set as well. Also, not able to open up to areas of trade because they don't have what to be established in the north and the near term to be somewhat is empirics or what's evidence is the most qualified and substantial piece of evidence and comprehensive look at the WTO gap with its entire existence indicates that there's not been an increase in trade. See, someone knows for every start argument if there's a Doha clause in term. It means it would increase the developing countries in developed countries interest into Doha later. The Raymond evidence is pretty good. Indicates it allows us an opportunity to reflect to be able to solve the economy later and in Doha's not the trade. So Ronald evidence was the one to see the link Doha's net better for the economy levy 312 president looks like remember that in 6 months ago available different 6 months in actually I read that already. Can it solve the economy? No evidence of why they're able to solve the economy in the short term. And if they bring their argument that there are no link to the Indian disadvantage, no reason why regional trade agreements wouldn't be able to solve the short term. The D subpoint is our alternative to James evidence indicates that we may be able to figure multi-level charts will lead to bi-level agreements. That is not necessarily bad and still a little bit of growth and prosperity. And all of their arguments are really exactly this one is entirely different than it has been in the past. And growth and counterbalancing towards unilateral dominance. No, Hobbesian system and what? Re-empowerment can only succeed with an alternative system to global economic governance. The alternative tax model is not a Hobbesian statement regulation. Reality is more for the volcano image of a nasty and British war trying to begin someone is letting the solver works in evidence indicates that now the US is unable to resolve the extended periods of conflict between the United States and China. Also mutual interest with China trade conflict substance having the action will be temporarily mutual independent nature of Sino-American trade and the quick sell Japanese use national liquid and multinational force American companies will lobby hard against action, but they do cause China the evidence indicates that it will lead to Chinese instability because they would not be able to support farmers anymore. These massive social unrest would see that this is a basic problem that is facing the food government raising evidence system would be a lead to a lash out of the class. The CCP, this is prior to the affirmative they read a piece of one AC evidence lead. One AC evidence has at least reached WTO friends, CCP stability well said, and 3 the Chinese government is pressure to conform the open market agreement and tries to hold trade after this trade jackets and now to global rules and regulations the country must adhere to in order to crack trade for investment. These rules are demanded by the dignity of this trade jacket, putting pressure on Chinese culture and we have STP may be unable to solve the problem inherent to adhere to the WTO scenario. LECs debate there's no reason why they're able to solve in the short term. Gallagher says that it causes inevitable development. There is no way they're able to solve for the poor around the world. This means inevitably it will take the WTO down. This set turns case any loser with the WTO could bring down the whole show down to 7 to success. The future WTO negotiations will depend on what guarantees are available to the losers. Negotiations must be directed to the relationship between the leading to the international community must be constructed after the grapple with the indigenous issue of unrelated obligations. We're not going to create any argument except that there's no impact to India, Pakistan, it's in our energy arguments right after the firm. The name is starting evidence indicates the least extinction No defense ready global warming bitches said something about Copenhagen that's not able to solve the short term. Our bill evidence is much better. In case we have multinational trade, it has to go all the way around the world. Things get shipped everywhere. There's a massive amount of emissions. The open ocean shipping accounts for about accounts for such a massive amount of emissions. But having collapsed to know how to be able to solve it. How failures for success on climate turns our argument for finance and experience. As I think the progress could help another process along the reason like too many people all once maybe was called to the diplomatic community, the WHO, negotiating to how to create the needs of our climate. I agree with the problem with that there's a lot of the people that's attractive climate change, but there's no economic benefits to the deal. Regionalization solves flexibility and reforms. The global trading system we're going to live crisis and deliver of climate crisis, the growing conflict between liberalization and emissions must be overcome by developing like platform which global warming given us a priority be eliminated to WTO's disputes bodies and practical change play in place of the power of the bodies. Student address of the climate change, the arguments on Trinity and Kyle's out is definitely not talking about liberal theory. Extended terms is able to solve for force related things. Extended terms is not so easy a cause. Same usually much less than Ontario ways. It's better the ones out to be hungry than for ones on homeland to be destroyed. All their evidence is high plate and 6 cents. Not to be policymakers to explain domestic audiences why the U.S. considering the regions or marginal states that are being private or wanting to act before there's any obvious threat to its interests.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
6.
Thank you.
You can get your film back. That's what it
Hey, Ricker, why does budget take out the case?
You said budget won't pass now, and it's said the economy.
Okay.
So just take something econ part of the case.
Okay, just wanted to double check.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, can I see your 1 and C on T?
It's right here. I found it.
It's just now, I mean.
I think there is other.
I'm gonna keep it. Get it. Yeah, I just wanted to read out everything.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's gonna be, cap, and case, what's that, cap budget case. Cap. knowledge subsidies, confidence prevents agricultural recycling. It's also arguments that indicates content of the plan, things that there are potential abuse arguments to exist in our current risk and eliminate assaults or criminal arguments, even if we link to the grammar boundary institution for these interpretations better for debate and as an analysis completes it does make sense, which shows why the 2 arguments in case he actually makes a sensible argument and elimination solves all these arguments because it keeps it grammatically clear resolution. Ground arguments, counterclaim, offsets is insufficient. Ground arguments, if they lose one counterclaim, is not a vote or make it, it's not sufficient. Ground like second is that it destroys our ground because we always lose to the offsets counterclaim. The only way you can take counterclaim is because we should have to restart the 1AC and make the conflict entirely different at the end of the year increase that increases negative ground that we just get agricultural recycling gain, which is good ground that then should get to define the core of the ground. We saw go to the extra top values and they mandate extra top compliance that reasonably if there's no ground loss, no potential use of the motor because they're varying rounds we can determine on this. It goes to enough of an after this. It's the same to debate the burden from method judge not going to their use that doesn't benefit doesn't take out the case. We still solve the economy. What on keys that we solve short-term economic collapse, we solve the impact. Then case debate, we do evidence out to the WCO. This is just straight up line. Come for our evidence. We solve their time frame arguments from minor evidence. We keep on conditional cycle plan. We solve us back. They also when we will prevent short-term trade laws, use of cotton ski to dope pot. This solves our China and multilateral arguments, even if they win all of the time frame arguments. Doesn't take out these advantages. Our age first 600 show evidence indicates that it is 1930 style trade right now. There's going to be more because the U.S. is leading us toward our past of mercantilist politics, which is going to lead to World War III because the College of World War II. Our past evidence is most recently qualified in from 313 and the sort of CFR director says that there's going to be a high risk of economic collapse causing war that will spill over because of trade protections. And 30s are body evidence indicates that the regional spaghetti goals which collapse trades. Now the escalation arguments are wrong. Our trade evidence indicates it's like the 1930s now because there are these of Mexico evidence that 47 countries are increasing their tariffs right now and the risk is high of trade wars. This Mexico scenario also indicates that things are going wrong in other scenarios. There's a Patrick Evans crossed by there. Multilateralism, they can see the extinction scenario. Drier evidence indicates that trade forums are necessary to solve even if they win all their trade arguments. A trade forum will still solve for multilateral cooperation. This answers all of their trade arguments. Additionally, they say they will solve the economy. The trade will kill the economy. That's Patrick. They say no poverty in the world. That's Patrick Control. Across the line, they say Chinese instability. We solve this. They can see that trade is the lifeline for the CCP, which means we solve the impact that's going to see evidence. Also, our Iconberry evidence as well as our Lou evidence and Patrick evidence indicates that the lack of integration will cause a U.S.-China war. We also have the trade war scenario from Patrick and Lou, and we would be able to solve a multiple platform, low-cost nuclear war like North Korea. And there's that Patrick evidence. They can see the extinction arguments that straight times, and there's no risk of their CCP cost impacts. We sent Kevin Seriously analytical. There's no escalation. Here's how they're stealing for the Channel and Austin. So everything really hard on the requirements for this, but a hallmark of action based on Charles was recognized the university office from the best of the which you outside of that kind of party steps and all the party for all. Of course, there's a reason we were second again. There's no single loser arguments wrong. We win trade fight solves. We win multiple scenarios for solvency. Cotton is key. We would have bargaining systems. We'll be able to solve back these scenarios. Their energy arguments are wrong. We can see our matches in there. The trade forms are able to solve for multilateral, solve for warming and energy. Even if trade doesn't solve trade forms, too. Here's more evidence New York Times today. The works that have come to address World War I. It was the only institution possible where nation will promote discipline on service. The challenges will be the rights and rules of global warming. This is all still solving and just their arguments. All can see hedge sticks out and impact the kind of like having to review the cards. They can see how sufficient. They literally say necessary but not sufficient, which means we still need to win the result. We all vote for the counterclaim. Their heads arguments are wrong. I considered arguments there. The considerations take that out. The time of the line. Let's all survey the top first. At least in their stickless evidence, you have to abide by the spirit of the law, not just the technical compliance, which means the counterclaim fails. Please develop countries. You can see that it's a strand that's also supported by our person evidence. The perception is key, which means all the technical compliance cards are not responsible to our app. The counterclaim would be perceived as supporting conservation subsidies, not supporting trade, which is the reason why it doesn't solve. Additionally, the plan is to do a certain line and then apply somewhere. In 7, the direct payments programs were not many conservation promises for themselves considerable planning flexibility to not having commodity prices. They do a short procurement guard price flexible additional incentives to bring the area and enhance yields that are not unusual to accounts for moving programs as simple to assure compliance with the latter in the spirit of the two obligations. And here to be arguments are responsible to develop the moral perception of their feminine and organic evidence is not reverse causal, and actually indicate the counterclaim will be able to solve. In these direct payment cuts are not sufficient to do anything. And additionally, there's no relation of their arguments to the cotton or DSP decisions to do a reform, which the counterclaim does not do. Now, the CAP arguments versus that this disproves their T arguments because it increases the ground saying that they read evidence saying that there would be agricultural recycling, which means they don't link to this evidence. Permutations true, reject their argument. That's even more point. There's no reason to be impact by the conditionality arguments to the extent that there's not a net decrease in substance, which means they don't solve. Additionally, fruits and vegetables evidence they have to remove that. Like the decision to be able to solve, extend that the status quo solves conservation substitutes, which resolve all the issues of the affirmative in case things like things would eventually happen because the multilateralism established by the plan. Additionally, in case that the generic conservation substitutes established to solve the environment, it spills over to solve their CBAC arguments. When they take out things our Eastern remembrance that in case the environment is is resilient, and as with good things like ice ages and asteroid strikes, it's not going to be destroyed because we don't have a specific seedback date. You can see that multi-levels will be able to solve this takes on all of their morality arguments, and additionally probability matters. When there is a massive lives being lost for more, then you shouldn't defer to their moral piece of evidence that morality is important. Additionally, it's only an extinction claim is considered a straight time to extinction scenario, and their seed arguments are wrong. They use the evidence because there are other seed banks besides the Boolean ones that are actually solving. There's a global trust fund that is giving money to seed banks that solve because it has 42,000 types of seeds already inside of our evidence indicates that this is sufficient to solve for the impacts that seed banks are supposed to solve for. Our GM evidence is substantially better than their indices. They read cards about pesticides. Our GM evidence indicates that they have GM technology now that allows the reintroduction of species solves all of the impacts because we can just take genetics from dead species and dead plants and animals and reintroduce it to the environment. This takes out any reasons why species would be necessary, and usually saying conditionality matter destroys a time incentive for ancestors for reading strategic add-ons, which kills all affirmative ground. None of their arguments assume our counter-interpretation, which was 2AR choice. This gives them all of their ground because they can basically read the counter on the way they want to. We just have to have a 2AR choice which checks the nature of the outcome.
719.
Yeah, no, what time is it?
750. There's a camera up there.
Do that with sorry.
There's a plugin for power strip here that said yes.
I'm down for communal property.
And it's also in it's like lemony. No, I
No, okay.
yes, but if I pull a SUNY, I'll
Okay, all right, yep.
The river has to make it's gross though, it's pretty good use Straight shot. Well, I'd like to see this, so. Do it now. No.
Oh no, oh no. Jesus, what? Stay strong. Stay strong.
can already get all of it on the chin and stuff.
It's rolling a little bit.
She wouldn't want to walk around. So,
The shiny chin.
you're a real man.
Did you go to f1.com? Okay, have you read all the questions? There's a fountain thing.
Thank you. It was kind of like there. So Miami. You were talking earlier. So just like go down on the top.
It's like a vehicle. So
they asked me to come down and kind of, yeah, just get them set up in order to be able to do it next year. I thought that was pretty reasonable. So,
You get paid for the consultants.
I just feel like a lot of people I want to make sure that I can help out. Obviously, yeah.
I take full credit for that.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of burn on it now. How old do you need to Yes. Like one of the people need it. Bad for you to take your book off and move obviously. I still have time. Yeah, I
Yeah, we're looking for 2 AC cap cards in the camera plan, if that helps at all.
Oh. I think that. Yeah.
I don't know if it's that's the point now. Okay.
Yes,
That was one of the cards.
Show you
To go. Not top down.
Yeah. Whatever it is, we're gonna eat it. Whatever.
Yeah, that's.
Those are the two cards on the left.
This one was spiking. No.
You're talking cases, right? I know you gave us cases last time.
Oh, it was going back here. Okay.
You got it?
Yeah, sorry, it was on there. It's a messy exit.
Okay, the order is T, the counter plan, and then trade. Everybody ready?
The 1AR has conceded that the money from the plan will be shifted into other payments because employee interest inside the United States means the affirmative does not solve for all of the same reasons that the counter plan wouldn't solve, because it's just a shift in degree payments. They're cross-examination, nebulous cross-examination, and they're only weaving to eliminate part of the resolution because the affirmative is not a cap, which means it is not the type of structural change in agriculture which is necessary to solve for the affirmative. If all of their solvency deficit arguments are true, they link to them as per the cross-examination to solve McLaren or different evidence indicates because of political concerns inside developed countries, cut in subsidies would most likely be shifted into other areas. Counterplan. They have functionally conceded that our warming evidence indicates that carbon sequestration because of environmental changes inside of the United States solves warming, and there's no impact because this question is explicitly highlighted as outweighing all other claims, and the multilateralism solves warming argument is new. In the last page, extinction, you can't come back from in war. If there's not a piece of evidence in relevant background says that war hurts the environment. They've also conceded our environmental leadership, and our modeling argument indicates that the United States agricultural policies will be modeled globally, which means we solve a huge internally to warming. Our evidence also indicates that it's the way that we will comply with Kyoto and other multilateral agreements, which means that we will largely a larger risk of the multilateralism internally, a larger risk of the multilateralism internally. If we look at the counterplan solves the advantage, offense defense is done because in terms of the environment, linearity obviously matters. If everybody solves multilateralism, that's not a reason why you shouldn't also have things like strong domestic protections that would be key to the environment. They have considered the original 1NC extinction claim indicates that there are a ton of ultimate causalities, which means you can't solve the gap like climate change, asteroids, comets, nuclear wars, which are all inevitable and only survivable in a world where you have feed banks to the backlog biodiversity. Now, line by line, they say that it's necessary but insufficient. All will extend the two pieces of solvency evidence from the one I see here. Their evidence indicates that the direct payments are not key because they're not trade distorting. Also, that if we send a unilateral signal, other countries get on board. All of their solvency deficit arguments don't apply to the counterplan because they don't have a piece of distinction. Evidence indicates that direct payments are not key. Our evidence is from the WTO plan decision, which indicates that it was not ruled in non-compliance, rather it was just ruled that it had to be added to the amber box quota, not be able to qualify as green box, which the counterplan would lower the overall amber box, which means that it would allow for it to be able to fit in. And they say their statements evidence indicates must be spirit of the law. I don't really know what this means, but it's the spirit of the law. Obviously, the counterplan is a gist of getting rid of subsidies. It's not really matter whether or not the direct payments evidence, especially the evidence of indicating that the non-trade distorting ones. They say that perceptions key. This evidence is about conservation subsidies. Our evidence, the counterplan is conservation compliance. There's a difference between green payments and the conditions that are already inside of subsidies for agriculture. Green payments are voluntary programs, which you get them, and that causes overcapitalization, which hurts the environment and causes overproduction. This is different because it mandates to make strict mandatory decreases in production levels. They say some evidence is evidence about green payments, about that argument's explained about. They say that we don't have reverse evidence of the direct payments are not key. That or you can explain why they say they're cap argument. This might be the only argument that actually answers our captain argument on the T flow, but there's not an intelligible answer here. It just says that it increases the link bound. They don't cap overall payments. The money from the counterplan, the money from the plan would probably be shifted into green payments, which we've had a comparative piece of evidence that indicates that does not solve because they're not as strict and strong as the things that are as the conservation compliance parts of the counterplan. They say that there's no net decrease in subsidies after lack of the counterplan gets rid of the rest of the subsidies. They say that statistical solves conservation subsidies. We've got a comparative piece of evidence that says that Bill Zach is trying to do things like green payments, but those are worse than those things, the things in the counterplan because they are not strict, they're voluntary. They say that seed bonding banks solve there. Our evidence indicates that all the other seed banks are only 0.6% of biodiversity, and the Millennium Seed Banks that provide funding for all of them, which means that we control a larger internal link to all these there. Or not key, they say that generic custom payments solve. They say that generic conservation payments solve these, when that's all the internal link to the advantage that I can explain about. They say environment's resilient. Evidence indicates that it's the assumption that the environment is resilient, which will eventually cause extinction. Also, if the environment is resilient, how the fuck is nuclear war linked to extinction? How does it spill over? This would also deny nuclear winter theory, reason why you should defer to a
warming. In fact, they say, well, to allow us to solve the question, impact it's a question of linearity that can spend when they say strict terms of extinction, it's this class of civilization. Also, in a world where you had a sea bank, we would be able to bring back the world. They say, other sea banks, well, that argument to explain about this in 2004, and it's probably talking about the first, the Millennium Sea Bank. There every evidence used by monoculture, like he is probably talking about what the calculus. They say, gee, Himsel's evidence indicates there's there, or the evidence that there's no evidence indicates when it's all warming, which is a much larger impact condition, not a big condition, situation or choice. It's not an argument that was originally, well, it is not it was not an argument that was originally in their interpretation, because they say dispositionality would tell me a dissent to dispositionality. We would add place to the counterpoint also with it. The new evidence only goes solvency deficit argument, which means that when there's some of those solvency deficit arguments, it increases negative gravity. It's most logical. They continue sharing negative health because that's the first class, but choose the topic there is not enough time spent here. You should trace all these arguments back. Just reason why you sticks from the counter plan, which is pretty obvious anyway. Also, they consider Anderson and Venezuela evidence indicates that you only need a 33% reduction to reduction. So if all their solvency deficit arguments are true, those are just reasons why we should have to be in compliance with it. If you conceded a slew of alternate causalities about other things we're not in compliance with, which means that they're like things like casinos and other things like that, which means that that those would be inevitable in the status quo. Now the trade advantage, they've conceded that Doha collapse is inevitable. If one country gets brought down, that means if we went into developing countries, like, but it takes nothing to not reform Doha. They so cannot solve trade. Or Gallagher and Wise evidence indicates that it collapses developing countries. It's only it denies the truth claim of the spillovers between developed countries and developing countries, which takes out the entirety of Doha. He only says it concepts no more. This argument also, they have conceded the restart argument of this. I don't know whether or not they solve Doha quickly or in the long term. You shouldn't either, because they have not taken a stance on this. We will be able to come back and they'll show in the long term after there's been a creation of political space for developing countries for all of our evidence on these claims. Or key evidence indicates that there is a structural bias inside the literature that supports the WTO. Also, it would not solve all of our advantages. It's not like there's this magical WTO wand that solve the environment. Their evidence just hype on these questions. That's our key evidence. Trade is inevitable. They are not unable to solve for massive protections. But I can see evidence indicates there's no race towards mass protection. Trade wars will not escalate to be provided by other issues. These laws will not compete. They will compete, but they will not confront most of the evidence. The one you see is specific to things like economic non-integration states in China, but there's mutual interest which guarantee the solvency and CCP class will be more likely to cause because reforms inside the country.
Ricker, can I see the subsidy shift card you plan on T? And what's the card that we're always going to come back on P?
You start, I got that right here for you too.
Okay, thank you.
Use everything for referencing this collapse inevitable. Hi, Karen. How are you?
So now I think that you might have gotten you're just like, you guys, you guys are like, that is what challenging someone.
Work is short overview, case study, counter plan, but T is going to be after the overview.
Maybe the T case counterpart.
Do not do anything crazy.
Burger doesn't really understand our burden, but there's a distinction within it. Yes, there are two strong terms. One is the unilateral culture critical software. Short-term scenario triggers economic and economic desperation. The second argument is that common compliance is necessary to provide the law, which is able to integrate China multilateral cooperation, which is clearly goes down by the end mitigating the benefits of the common versus time frame biodiversity is going to take a long time to escalate. There's no scenario for global warming happening this next over. China's going to fight with hegemony, integration, critical software. This is also separate from the question of trade wars. All of their trade war arguments can be true, and China can fight the United States because it does not like the hegemonic order. The WTO's created creates strategic interests and integrated democracy set. The nuclear war is going to kill and prevent these types of cooperation because we control the terminal uniqueness to all of their arguments. The second argument is multilateralism makes literally all their arguments inevitable because there's no scenario being able to solve for things like human we do not cooperate because the conceded piece of economy says that if no one cooperates, there's no scenario for cooperation outside of this because it creates a strategic cooperation because trade is the focal point of cooperation. RTAs are all insufficient to solve multilateralism. Even if they are sufficient to solve the trade, look, if this ends to their environment effects, they don't have any credible offense against our security risks or the reason why solve the disaster, which is the reason why you voted for them. Now, additionally, they have conceded the argument that GM solved seedbanks. He only says this is a route for not going for seedbanks, but they want it, but the block rates that seedbank solves warming, which means you have conceded that the status quo warming is inevitably solved because GM resolves seedbanks, which resolves warming. Voted for him in very clear top county. Again, another example, if I'm not really understanding the burden, yes, it is true that the funding of the plan will be recycled to other things. The question of what it is recycled to, i.e., that's totally irrelevant if our money goes to things like soy, because soy doesn't freaking matter in the WTO negotiations. The only evidence we read about subsidies being related to the WTO is cotton subsidies, i.e., our should make references to compliance is necessary to provide our new evidence says cutting cotton subsidies necessary to provide a bargaining chip for negotiators, and our other piece of evidence says cotton cuts are necessary to provide a jumpstart for negotiation, which means it is irrelevant if the subsidy gets cycled into other things other than cotton. That is the premise of our case. He says none of these arguments were really excited in the block law and the 200 just reasons for which is the reason why you should not go and go on to all their evidence on you should for all our solvency claims which were functionally dropped from the block we are able to resolve by providing a negotiator for our trade negotiators by complying with the decision in the right type of way and as well as contents were leading to for negotiation. They're arguing the delay is nonsensical because there is no reason why you be able to solve because cotton is the only way that we can provide the WTO, which means there's no scenario of the revival of don't have the WTO within their delay arguments. Additionally, it does not solve because if the oil lapses in the short term, then there's no scenario for cooperation. Instead, countries no longer have the strategic incentive to return to the WTO countries of cotton status. Additionally, the plan solves though in the right type of way, i.e. cotton cuts and then we solve any of the reason why short-term compliance would be bad because the reason why short-term revival dough is bad is because it's a really shitty dough, but the plan is so good dough. And then into these distinctions, RTA's arguments, I'm not going for any of our RTAs or protection methods, I'm just going to China, which capable of imposing discipline onto its members, which means we solve our key other arguments not. The other way around, we solve all their arguments. This is an easy thing to decide counterclaim.
His only answer wasn't to do that, was wrong.
Oh, his only answer was to no, I extended the 1AC Dwyer evidence, Matthew 7 said that if you solve all your term expert warming, it's cited as evidence, counterclaim. The counterclaim does not solve any more way, even if it does solve other arbitrator and prefer these A-trade negotiators. None of their evidence explains how the counterclaim functions within Revive 2 negotiations. Our evidence very specific about the role that direct payments and contemplate and how they receive fees is necessary but not sufficient, even if the counterclaim that all that is necessary to comply with the WTO decision. It is not insufficient, i.e. the way we comply matters as well. Yes, they might solve compliance arguments, but none of those are sufficient to lead to renegotiation within Doha, and the resolution of that is only good arguments the counterclaim is able to solve, because the counterclaim is in the bad type of direct subsidies. This argument is literally nonsensical in the context of referring to, because we are in negotiations, i.e. how can trade negotiators prove that this is the right type of trade negotiations? If there is a history of screwing over developing countries, labeling things direct payments, and then doing sham and ground work, then why would they believe the counterclaim? There's a very low threshold for this argument, which is much prefer all arguments. Now, he said myself to versus Stiglitz, the evidence, which he makes fun of. I don't understand. He's a noble lawyer in economics, and we have to actually eliminate them because the counterclaim is perceived as technical compliance. Yes, it is true that you might at 100% comply with the decision, but because you do not eliminate them and merely perform them, countries are always going to be skeptical of them. Or person evidence who provides the intellectual credibility, which answers all of your arguments, because there is a history of manipulation of U.S. subsidies. The reason why you are not involved in the negotiations. And lastly, are the important investment argument, which is literally dropped one of your pieces of new piece of evidence, extend the night evidence into shoemaker evidence that says that the counterclaim does not lift the fruit and vegetable restriction, which is the reason why direct payments were really screwed up, and the reason why they were issued within the case, which means you do not actually even lead to compliance with issue, because you don't eliminate the ties to concepts, which means you don't even access the arguments when you would be able to solve these, which means there's no way they're able to solve any of your arguments. The impact of extinction is easy to make decide. The bottom of their arguments are wrong, because their argument that the environment is not resilient, proofing forward doesn't lead to extinction is also a reason why global warming doesn't lead to extinction. It doesn't extend as resilient to your argument, because there's only propensity of security risk, making lower impacts inevitable, prefer the short-term impacts of extinction.